Westcoat's Resinous Flooring Solutions, presented by Westcoat Specialty Coating, Mallory Kabing. She's the architectural representative, and joining Mallory today is Bill England for the Q&A. So I'll pass it over to you, Mallory.
Thank you, Lori. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a presentation today. It's just a PowerPoint presentation with a small video, so a little different than CMP did, but hopefully we can help kind of explain Westcoat, what we can do and what we can offer you. So thanks again for joining us today. And yeah, my name is Mallory Kabing. I am an architectural representative for Westcoat. I have been in the industry, coatings industry, for about 15 years, specializing in multifamily waterproof decking and industrial flooring. Today on this call with me is Bill England, and he is our technical sales manager for the Southern California region. Bill has been in the industry since about 1991, specializing in building envelope waterproofing and industrial resinous flooring. So he's a wealth of knowledge, and he will be on the call to answer questions after the presentation. A little bit about Westcoat before we jump in. Westcoat's been manufacturing flooring systems and solutions from San Diego, California for over 30 years. We've used the West in Westcoat to define the 4 different categories of systems that we offer. So on the screen here, you see WP, EC, SC, and TC. So the WP is waterproofing. We have waterproofing options for plywood and concrete, decorative finishes, and they can be interior and exterior. Our EC division is our epoxy coat line, and that's what we'll kind of dive into a little bit more today. We do have industrial epoxies and decorative epoxies. The SC is our concrete stains and sealers line. So we do have a full line of concrete stains and a full line of concrete, different types of sealers. So we will dive into epoxies, resinous flooring today, but we actually do have about 10 or 12 other different types of sealers that can offer different benefits. Now for our TC line, this is our texture coat line, and these are decorative overlays. So if you have an exterior or interior space that maybe you just don't like the look of the concrete, you can do an overlay over these concrete surfaces. And again, whether it's interior, exterior, kind of give you a new blank slate to work with. We have 12 reps nationwide. Here's just a little map so that you can kind of see where we're at. Like I mentioned, we are in San Diego, so we are pretty heavily, saturated on the West Coast, but we can definitely reach you any part of the nation and help you out. So today's topics, we are going to talk about resinous floor coatings, typically known as epoxy floor coatings. And we're going to talk about, why these coatings fail. Concrete preparation and moisture are 2 different typical reasons why coatings fail. We're also going to talk about different types of almost good, better, best applications, depending on what your use of your space is, and then talk about how we can actually integrate a seamless coat into these resinous flooring options. And then take a look at some resinous floor coatings versus some alternative, floor finishes that you could see. So concrete prep. Prepping the concrete and testing for moisture are going to be 2 of the most important things that you can do prior to an installation that can help create a very long service life for these floor coatings. So inspecting the concrete is number 1, should be cured for a minimum of 28 days. Now, that is an industry standard number. So brand new concrete should be cured for 28 days. Moisture emissions should be less than 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet or less than 75% relative humidity. So I'll show you a test in just a second of 2 different ways that you can test moisture in a concrete slab. But testing for moisture is pretty important. Like I said, if you don't prep the concrete properly, or if it has too much moisture, it will actually cause the coating to pop off that concrete. So something that's really important. Concrete should be a minimum of 2,500 PSI. Now, this is some places we typically see less than 2,500 PSI is maybe some trenching was done and a pour back was, some material was put back into a floor that doesn't quite meet that 2,500 PSI. The coating itself is stronger than that and will actually come off of the floor. So Something to be aware of. Again, this is just kind of typical reasons you could see some failures. And then any type of kind of bonding agent, oil, dust, any curing agent that could prevent proper adhesion could be a reason you see failure in the future. So 2 different tests that you see here to test moisture in a concrete slab. The left-hand side is a relative humidity test, and that tests the moisture content present in a concrete slab. And the top right-hand corner is a calcium chloride test, and it will test the moisture emission vapor present coming through a concrete slab. Now, concrete surface prep, this is a guideline that we go by. Today we'll be talking about systems that are kind of in this thin film and high build coatings. And with that, a certain type of prep actually does need to be done to the floor. So these are guidelines that we call out in our specifications. This is a CSP, or Concrete Surface Prep Guideline, that is put out by the International Concrete Repair Institute. So again, just a few handful of reasons why coatings might fail prior to installation. And we'll just kind of jump into now different types of coatings that you can put in different spaces. So when we talk about options, we do kind of have, almost this good, better, best, type of way of helping provide you a solution for your flooring needs. A checklist that I'm going to kind of go through if you were to reach out and say, I have a, back of house, high foot traffic, kitchen. We want to know what's the, kind of foot traffic. Is it light duty, medium duty? Is it heavy duty coating we're going to need? Do you want this to be clear or pigmented? We have both options. Do you want non-skid texture added into this coating? And then type of traffic. So foot traffic versus vehicular traffic is going to be 2 different types of coatings. So in our light duty coatings, we have a typical coating that you would see is a thin film epoxy, which is usually 1 to 2 coats of an epoxy. These can be water-based epoxies or 100% solids epoxy. The difference there is just kind of a little bit of build between the 2 different sealers. And you typically see this in kind of, garage floors, some kitchen spaces, rec rooms. What you see on the screen here is a school of medicine. So Kaiser School of Medicine. This is just an area where they're actually learning how to do medicine. So a solid finish there versus, this is just front of house retail space, and this is a clear epoxy finish. So 2 different types of ways that you can get that kind of lower build light duty coating. One's a little bit more decorative than the other, but definitely different options there. Now, medium duty coatings, when we kind of move into spaces that are a little bit more back of house. So auto dealerships, airplane hangars, commercial kitchens are a really great place for this system that we call a double broadcast system. And so with a double broadcast system, you actually put down an epoxy primer, you throw sand into it, put another epoxy on top of it, throw sand again, and then do another sealer epoxy on top of that. So a little bit higher of a build than just that 2-coat epoxy system. But you can see here too, this is applicable for back of house or front of house. So 2 different types of ways that you can get that, double broadcast system. Now, when we move into heavier duty coatings, an epoxy mortar is something that we typically see in back of houses, commercial kitchens. Warehouses is another, great space for this. This is going to give us a little bit more of a thickness than even that double broadcast system would. So heavy duty machine, kind of areas where we know probably equipment might get dropped on this floor, and we're able to protect the floor, protect the concrete below, and give it, some space that it can actually kind of take that abuse. Now, if we're in a very, very abusive, space, especially breweries, wineries, manufacturing plants, a urethane cement is going to be the Cadillac that you can get in epoxy flooring. It's chemical resistant, it has high impact resistance. So if something like a keg were to fall on this floor, the coating below is not going to break apart, basically. It has really, really great adhesion properties as well. So this is going to adhere to your concrete substrate in a way that some other epoxy floors don't. So again, just kind of knowing the use of your space. Something that we really like to touch on as well is a cove that can be integrated into this floor to create a completely seamless floor. So something that I want to touch on, our last topic here is resinous floor coatings versus alternative kind of common flooring systems that you see. So a lot of times we do see, tile in back of house spaces. And with this, an epoxy flooring actually is, very chemical resistant, can provide antimicrobial growth. So anything that kind of falls onto that floor isn't going to be allowed to kind of go into the crevices of that grout and create mold, if you will. So we do, kind of like to touch on this because again, where we see this is a lot of back of house and restaurant spaces, commercial kitchens, that cove that you can create with the seamless epoxy floor is something that, it doesn't really translate to tile. It's not seamless on that cove space. Same thing when you have a drain, you're able to actually tie your drain into that flooring and have a completely seamless floor. Whereas tile, again, with the grout, it does just kind of allow some space for a less cleanable floor. Tends to be a little bit more difficult to maintain down the road too. This picture right here is pretty great. You can actually see two different tiles right next to each other. So kind of matching tile down the road, epoxies are really easy to reseal. And the entire floor looks like it's never had any repairs if it needs it. The last thing I do want to touch on is resinous flooring or epoxy flooring versus polished concrete. So we in the coating industry see a lot of polished concrete called out on specifications. And it does have a really great time and place. But what we do see is sometimes polished floors are in spaces that can't handle a polished floor. So the left-hand side is a picture where just dish soap has fallen onto a polished floor. And then the right-hand side is actually a sealed floor. So I do have a little video to show the differences between kind of polished concrete and sealed concrete, and just a little demonstration here. So the first thing that you see being applied onto this board. So on the left-hand side, we have polished concrete, and on the right-hand side, we have what we call a grind and seal. So it's just one or two coats of an epoxy. And I'm just using materials that are pretty common, can be found, in your kitchen pretty easily. So ketchup, mustard, hot sauce. These are pretty typical materials that we could see dropped onto a polished concrete floor. Even something as simple as water. So water, because polished concrete tends to be more porous, everything that's on the left-hand side for the polished concrete will actually start to soak in. So you can see here is a 2-minute time lapse. And the water in the bottom left-hand corner is kind of the one that you can see the most, really soaking in and creating a darker ring on this actual floor. So now, once I'm wiping up all of the ketchup, the mustard, you can see the stain that is occurring on the floor. And this isn't something that's going to come out. So this is going to stain. You can kind of see some prior stains from demos that I've done with this sample before. But on the grind and seal side, you can actually just clean it up. And it's really easy to, again, maintain. This is going to be far more chemical resistant than a polished concrete floor. And yeah, just something we wanted to kind of show and illustrate so that, again, you can kind of be aware of when to use, these epoxy floor systems and kind of what they can do in different spaces. So Lori, I'll pass it back over to you for any questions and we'll get Bill on.
Great, thanks, Mallory. And thanks for showing all the different applications for such an effective solution. As Mallory said, we will open it up for Q&A. And again, just to ask any questions, you can navigate to the Q&A at the bottom of your right-hand screen. And our first question, Bill, is what are your floor prep recommendations when moving from old flooring tile to resinous floor coating into commercial kitchens?
Good morning, Lori. Thank you. Great question. You know, when you're going from tile to a resinous flooring system, you do have to remove the tile and any thin set or mortar that was used to adhere the tile. And then we would refer you back to the concrete surface profile chart that Mallory showed. Depending on which system you're going to use, you would need to profile, excuse me, the concrete. And typically you're going to see a CSP of 3 for these types of coating systems, and that's achieved usually by shot blasting. Shot blasting is a way to propel shot at the floor to abrade it, profile it. Today's shot blasters are dustless and hooked to a vacuum, but that's your best bet to achieve the concrete surface profile that we need for the new system.
Okay, great. Another question, what kind of flooring finish would you recommend for a correctional facility? This will be hallways and very heavy traffic areas.
You know, in that environment, you could look to the double broadcast system that we talked about, which is basically about 1/8 of an inch thick. And that's epoxy and then sand used in 2 lifts to provide the build that we need. It also provides good texture, so it's non-slip and can still be cleanable. If it's really heavily trafficked, you could look at the urethane cement with a polyaspartic top coat. You would have to see which, you know, how much traffic you anticipate. Those would both be good options for that type of environment.
Okay, thanks. Can you install the epoxy or resinous flooring outside?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, we get asked that a lot. Epoxy tends to be kind of a generic term for a lot of coating systems, and people will say, oh yeah, just epoxy it. Epoxy is very chemical resistant, has great adhesive properties. It bonds very well to concrete, but it is not UV stable. So if you're going to do a loading dock or maybe a pool equipment enclosure area and you want those chemical resistance properties to protect the concrete, you could use the epoxy to prime and do your build or your body coats, but you would want to go with either a UV stable polyurethane or a polyaspartic for UV resistance. And that would just be a thin final top coat to provide that UV protection.
Okay, and we have time for probably one more question. How long does a resinous grind and seal finish typically last, and how hard is it to reapply and not notice that it was repainted?
So, you know, that's the great thing about doing a maintenance or a reseal is you're going to retop coat the entire area. So it will look new again. As far as how long it lasts, that's going to really depend on how much foot traffic's getting, how much wear. We do recommend that you inspect every 2 to 4 years. And you may need to do a maintenance at, you know, anywhere from 3 to 5 years, but it really does depend on how much foot traffic and wear the floor is receiving. It's going to be wildly different and unique to each space.
Okay, thank you. If you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question, you will be able to connect with both of the presenters after today's session. Any last minute thoughts, Mallory, Bill, before we wrap up today's session?
Okay, come check us out at www.westcoat.com. We have a lot of information there and resources that is very easy to navigate. And thank you for your time.